Our next speaker is Lesley Everett, who is an expert on personal branding. It turns out that to be a great communicator, it helps to develop and nurture your own brand. And Lesley's going to come on up and share her expertise in that area. So please, a warm welcome for Lesley.
Do you know what people say about you behind your back? No. Well, you should do, because that quite simply is your personal brand. What people say about you when you're not there, when you're not in the room, when you finish the meeting, when you finish the presentation, when you've left the bar at the end of the evening, that's what your brand is. And of course, we don't always know what people say about us when we're not there, but we're often reminded that we're talked about when we're not in the room, when we bump into someone in the corridor and they say, "Oh, I was in a meeting on Wednesday afternoon and your name came up." And you think to yourself, "I wonder what was said, but I don't really want to ask." And we're left wondering. But it reminds us that we're talked about all the time when we're not there. And that quite simply is our brand. And really what we do in a busy business world is we don't take control of it. We don't think about it consciously. As Eric just said, if we're really going to be effective communicators in today's world, we've got to make sure that we manage those perceptions that people have of us. I'm also a great believer in that, and I believe that the strongest part of your corporate brand today is what your clients and customers say about your company to their contacts. That goes global instantly with social media today, as we know. So what people say about your company will always come through an interaction they have with an individual. Not so much the products and the services, it's about the individual person, individual interaction, and how you make them feel. How any of your people within your organization make them feel. In their eyes, that is the brand of your organization. So my message today really is about people being the most strongest and most powerful part of the brand. And how can we use that to leverage that to get ourselves to move from executing operational or being an operational execution function within IC and move to be strategic business advisors within the company. We've got to develop our own brands in a strong and powerful and consistent way and authentic. And I love what David Grossman was saying earlier as well about the respectful authenticity. It's so key today. And I think we just saw from Richard there, a real authentic guy giving a great message. We absolutely buy into that because it's authentic. So we've got to develop these skills today if we're really going to make sure that we get the brand of ourselves, of the IC team out there, and obviously ultimately the company message. I believe there's another layer today. We talk about brand, we talk about customer experience, but I really do believe that we've got this extra layer today, which is what I'm talking about here, and that is the personality of the brand. That was the title of my latest book, which we've got outside, and it's creating corporate brand personality and creating trust, respect, and authenticity within a business. So we're sort of moving on from the certainly traditional customer service, but also customer experience, into this realm of giving an organization personality. And as IC professionals, what we're going to see today is that you can develop some of this yourselves to give you a greater voice at that C-suite level. Also, your team to be taken seriously and have a strategic input, but also how we can get people within the organization, senior leaders out there, developing their own personal brands so that they're out there more and being known for what they're brilliant at and what they're an expert in, rather than just CEO of XYZ organization. So I'm going to share some of my thoughts and research around all of this in terms of corporate branding and team branding, and give you a flavor as well for how you might develop your personal brand just as a foundation to build on, and of course to give you something as a structure, if you like, to take away and keep developing, because it doesn't happen overnight. I believe that the reality of the corporate brand today is not just of all of those elements on the inside there. We spend millions of dollars every year on some of those aspects there, and advertising and sponsorship and marketing collateral and websites and creating new logos. But if we don't have this glue and strength around the outside to hold it all together, then we leak corporate brand investment significantly. We can't easily measure it, but we will leak corporate brand investment significantly. I always remember back about 4 years ago now, and I was working at the Langham Hotel in London. Does anyone know the Langham Hotel? You know the Langham chain. It was one of London's 5-star hotels. And I just want to tell you this little story because it really reinforces what I was saying about people talking about a brand to their contacts. And it reminded me how powerful this stuff is. I was doing a 2-day program for their managers. And on day 1, I was having lunch in the restaurant at the Langham with the HR director. And on the drinks menu for lunch, they had something that I always loved as a child and I've grown up with. And I thought, oh yeah, I'll order one of those. That'll be a great experience at the Langham Hotel. And they had ginger beer on the menu. Does anyone like me love ginger beer? Yeah, a few of you. I know every brand, I know every new one that comes out all the time. I love ginger beer. I ordered this ginger beer, and the waiter came back a few minutes later looking a bit sheepish. And he said, I'm really sorry, madam, but we don't have any ginger beer today. We've run out. And I said, oh, I was really looking forward to a ginger beer experience at the Langham Hotel, and we had a bit of a laugh. The end of day 2, they'd valley parked my car for a couple of days. When they brought the car back, on the passenger seat of the car was a bottle of ginger beer and a note that said, enjoy. And a bottle opener so I could have it on the way home. It was a non-alcoholic one, by the way. Now, it didn't finish there because 4 months later, I organized a conference and brought some of my speaker friends over internationally to this conference, and we all stayed at the Langham Hotel. And when I checked into my room that night, you can imagine what was in the room. 2 bottles of ginger beer on ice and a note that said, enjoy. Now, I know there's a link between the Valley service and the waiter and the CRM system for 4 months later. You see, that didn't matter to me because it was about me. They thought about me. Now, I've talked about that service, that experience, to thousands of people in conferences around the world. One of the Langham's strongest values is providing exceptional customer service. And I talked about that, and I know that people remember it because I get messages all the time about ginger beer. I get ginger beer sent to me through the post when a new brand comes out. In fact, I think I'll change it to Krug Champagne. I'm getting a bit sick with ginger beer now. We'll just change the story a little bit. But I know people talk about it, and they remember the Langham brand as a result. People talk about your brand when you make it about them, when they have a positive people experience. We can use that for ourselves. We can use that for our teams. People talk about us in a way we want to be talked about, and we really live and breathe those values we stand for. That's when we build a strong, consistent brand. I also think that we're in danger. There is a risk in business today in that with all the clever marketing methods that we have around for us right now, all the digital mechanisms to get our brand out there and raise awareness, we're actually climbing to a great height in terms of setting expectations of our brand and the experience that people have of our brand. But what I find with the studies we do and the companies I work with a lot, or I see and experience, is that we're not developing people to the level we need to really live and breathe that brand that we're advocating up here consistently and powerfully and broadly all the time. So we're creating this imbalance, a bigger height to fall from. So great to have these clever marketing methods to get the brand awareness out there and talk about our values and that we're a values-driven organization and we have a great mission and vision statement. If we're not giving people the tools to develop their own brand and communicate effectively, then we're actually creating a massive gap. And I think that is a risk to a business today with the methods that we have available to us. We're creating potentially a massive brand sinkhole if we don't think about aligning this a little bit more. There's a lot that we can do to adjust that, but I'm just going to let you think about that more. Is there a sinkhole that you're creating in the business by not communicating the values via people behaviors effectively in alignment with those messages? I think also when we're looking at communicating effectively, what I find in organizations that I work with, that marketing and HR and communications don't work as closely together as we could do. But if we do work together and we collaborate more and we're transparent and open and honest, we actually create this sweet spot in the middle, which creates that real brand personality alignment for making sure that the organization is together. So all the marketing messages are actually communicated out there through the IC function and through HR and training and development. Something that we don't often think about enough. And I think the function of the IC function as well has a great deal to do with, and when we're talking about you having more of a strategic presence at C-suite level, you have a lot to do with employer brand, which is so high on the agenda of organizations today. There's a lot of elements of the employer brand that we're all aware of, but there are two at the end about having inspiring leaders as well and engaged employees. And I think we can do an awful lot with that, with certainly the Populo platform and the great data that we can get from that. But if we combine that with our communication skills personally and those of the team, we actually really serve to support the employer brand, which will be high on the agenda at C-suite level. You can be sure of that. By the way, we will have an abridged set of these slides that you'll get on the app afterwards, so don't feel you have to write everything down here. So I call this a new wave of branding, this people part of the brand. And we'll take it even as far as to say that if we can help to develop the leaders within our organization and yourselves to develop such a powerful and strong and consistent personal brand, in that we're known for the expertise that we have and who we are as individuals, rather than just the IC director or the CEO of an organization, then we get more exposure externally, we get more exposure internally. That in turn raises the PR levels of the organization. And I believe that people are this new wave of branding if personal branding and team branding is used effectively. So it's those I want to share some of the methods that we use today with you to give you some thoughts around how you might develop that in alignment with all the other tools that you actually have. If you can just raise your hand for a moment in terms of if you believe that there is a distinct difference between the perception that you believe you have of you and yourself as a team and a function within the business and the perception that the C-suite have. Could you raise your hand if you feel there is a distinct difference between what you think you bring as a team and what you believe the C-suite see you as? Put your hands higher so we can see the lights are low. So a lot of you do have that. And I know from the studies that we've had and the surveys in advance of this with IC professionals that you do see that the brand that you project or you believe you project is different to the one seen at C-suite. And that's where I hope we can start to close that gap just a little bit through people branding. The walking tool process that we use, our methodology, takes us on a journey from looking at where those gaps and perceptions might be, the strengths that we have and the perceptions that others have of us, either of the team, the IC team, or us as individual professionals. And we look at the backstory of an individual to get compelling messages across. So when we're talking about presenting complex data, perhaps, and getting more of a strategic input and voice, we can weave in stories that develop our personal brand, but also get a compelling message across in a compelling way. We look at presence, how you project that through voice and body language. We look at visibility and profile, internally and externally. How well are you known for what you really bring? And it takes us on a whole journey and developing rapport with other individuals as well. So it's a personal development tool as well as something that can aid that communication. So one of the analogies I often use for personal branding is it's a little bit like a pearl in an oyster, because a pearl in an oyster grows organically over a period of time. It gradually evolves. As layers get added to it, it gradually grows. And that's exactly the same as your personal brand, your team brand, or perhaps the reputation that you build. Every day you're adding layers to it without even realizing. Because you're not really clear, perhaps, what your brand is as an individual or as a team, you're not really clear whether you're weakening and diluting that brand or whether you're reinforcing it positively. I think this is a good starting point to think about what layers are we adding every day? What layers have you added today already with the people you've met? Are they reinforcing the brand you want to be known for? Or are they diluting a little bit and giving out a confusing message? We'll do a test on that in a little bit. You're not going to sit there and listen to me for an hour. We're going to do some exercises on this in a moment. So, another analogy we can use. Your brand is a little bit like a tree. When you look at the roots of a tree, they're often hidden beneath the surface. And those roots consist of your values, your beliefs, your standards, your strengths, your motivators and your drivers. They're all there, but they're often hidden beneath the surface. Other people don't get to see what they are. They're not demonstrated enough. And in fact, we don't often know what they are. If I asked you all now and put you on the spot and said, can you name me your top 5 personal values? I wonder how many of you could actually do that. I'm not going to ask you to do that, don't worry. They might be a little bit fuzzy in our mind. We might vaguely know what they are, but not often very clear. What we're judged on, of course, is this bit on the surface, the bit that people see all the time, and how we present ourselves, how we speak, the first impressions and non-verbal communication, the attitude and behaviors and social skills. All of these things are visible, and we get judged on those. But often they're completely incongruent with who we really are authentically. So we've got to do a little bit of a stop and an upside-down, inside-out approach to building our brand. And when I talk about your brand, I'm talking about you as individuals and you as a team. So a lot of this you can apply to both. What do we really stand for? What motivates us? What are we here to do? What's our purpose? And then let's look at how we take that authentic core and then package it and project it on the surface. And of course, everybody has different views of what values actually mean. I'll just do a quick exercise with you now. If you take a word that often crops up when we look at value sets of an organization, take the word integrity. It may be one of your values for the company that you work for. And I'd just like you to write the word integrity down on a piece of paper. And underneath the word, I'd like you to write 3 words that for you describe what integrity actually means. What does integrity mean to you? In 3 words, 3 separate words. Don't think about it too much, just almost a gut reaction. Just 3 words that for you describe what integrity means. I'll give you 10 more seconds. Okay, can somebody share with me the 3 words that they've got? Just stick your hand up if you can share. Yeah, jump at the back.
Prove your belief.
True to your belief?
Prove your belief.
Prove your belief. Okay. And do you have any more? So it's 3 separate words, but prove your belief would be 1. Okay. Anyone got a set of 3? Thank you very much. Lady down here.
I have trust, honest, and congruent.
Trust, honest, and congruent, and prove your belief. Thank you. Has anybody got anything completely different? Any more words to share? Yes, and here.
Honesty, trustworthiness, and transparency.
Okay, great. Has anybody got exactly those 3 words? What have you got?
No,
You've got those 3. Okay. Anyone else got anything different? Thank you. Completely different. One more.
I've got honesty and truth, but I also have sincerity.
Sincerity. Okay, great. Thank you. So you'll see with a room full of people like this that everybody has got different words. All of you be looking at them and think, well, I don't have anything the same as that. Often we don't have 2 people that have got the same 2 words, 3 words. Some of you have something completely different, a completely new set. And that's the level we need to get to when we're looking at values. Because we create values in an organization. You might have values for the team. But unless you give people the time and the tools and the confidence to delve into what those mean for them and allow them to internalize and interpret them in their own way, you'll never get the behaviors changing to create that culture and that brand consistently that we need to have. So you need to give people the time to say, what does it mean to me? And then how does that translate to behaviors within my job? Try that exercise with the teams because it's very valuable. People feel that they're valued and respected. They don't have to conform to everybody else's way of thinking what the values mean. They have to conform to what they believe they mean, and we all get to the end result. There's a great book by a guy called Bill George. He wrote a book called Authentic Leadership. I don't know if anybody's read it. He was the former CEO of Medtronic over here in the US, and he looked at what makes successful leaders today successful. And one of the things that's a thread that runs right the way through the book is that, first of all, he says that he found that these successful leaders have very strong and clear values. They're crystal clear about their values, their personal values. And then secondly, they're transparent with those values. They're open about them, they're honest about them, they share them. Everybody around them knows what they stand for, and they take people with them much more effectively. Great for communication. And then thirdly, and this is the toughest bit in corporate life anyway, they don't compromise on those values. That is tough sometimes, because we do sometimes have to compromise in a corporate world. We have to compromise on something perhaps we don't believe in. But if we're having to do that more than once or twice in a short period, then we start to question, am I in the right environment? Am I in the right company, the right team? But often there's a way to overcome that. If we're strong with our values and other people understand who we are, what we stand for, we take people with us, we communicate much more effectively. So speak up, let people know who you are, what you expect. This is what you stand for. The complete personal brand then, in our methodology terms, it starts with this authentic core in the middle. This is the piece that we have to really get clear. And we're going to do some thinking on this in a moment. That's then surrounded by your motivators, your strengths, and your values. That's what supports that inner core. Then we've got all the elements that perhaps are on the tree analogy on the surface. So the body language, the first impressions, attitude, behaviors, social skills, all of those are visible. We get judged on them, the way we present, the way we turn up. And then the outer ring is the piece that's ongoing, and that's the visibility and communication. And often I find when I'm coaching, certainly at senior level, I find there's a big incongruency between this outer ring and the inner core. People, what they often show on the outside is they behave in a way that they think they should because they've been molded by the outside world rather than really living and breathing their authentic core. So often we have to just put the brakes on and strip these layers down to get to the inner core again and build them up. So don't just be molded by the outside world. Think about you as an individual. How do you want to be perceived? What do you want to be famous for? Do you want to be famous for being a catalyst of change of the IC function within your industry, within your company? What do you want to be well known for? Make sure you're clear about that. And don't just be molded by the outside world. And I think what is refreshing now, when we see millennials coming into the workplace, and there's a number of you here today, they're much more confident about being themselves. Sometimes that can get them into trouble as well, of course, but they are more confident. It's us, generation before. So we need to give them the tools to do this in a way that fits with the organization. So what is it you want to be famous for? What do you want to stand out for? What do you want to be different at? How do you want people to talk about you behind your back? Do you want to be seen as this catalyst of change, to become strategic business advisors within the company, a key player in the IC industry? Really be clear about what you want to achieve. And I'm just going to share some processes with you to get you thinking about this as well. Now, you might wonder what an espresso machine has got to do with personal branding. I have a great analogy, and it's a whole method that I use in longer programs, and we spend some time on it. It's a very valuable, deep exercise. But just to get you thinking about it now, if you think about all the coffee beans that get thrown in at the top, every single one of those coffee beans represents an experience in your life, a pivotal moment, a challenging time, something your mum said when you were small that you always remember, something a teacher said at school that always comes back to haunt you, or comes back when you've got a big decision to make. All of those experiences get thrown in at the top. They get ground and percolated around inside to create your values, your beliefs, your motivators, your drivers, your authentic core, as it were, your DNA. And what comes out in that tiny cup underneath, in its purest essence and purest form, is your brand statement. Those few sentences that describe who you are, or who the team are, and what your purpose actually is. But it'll come through the experiences that you have in life. And if we try and create it any other way, then it'll be inconsistent because it's not authentic. So we've got to do some deep diving there. And it can be quite an emotional exercise when you do this for yourself. But I would urge you to do it because you'll come up with some great stories that you can use to put into presentations and messages just to drive home a business point. So this is where you get thinking for yourselves. I'd like you to take a blank sheet of paper. You've all got notebooks there, so take a blank page. And I'd like you to think about standing in front of a hypothetical full-length mirror. Bear with me on this one. And I want you to look at that person you see in that mirror. And I want you to think about, what do I see when I look at that brand of an individual? And we're going to get as many words written down as we can, and I'll give you some guidelines here. I want you to think about your personality, and we're going to keep this positive. I don't want any weaknesses written down. That's too easy. I always say we don't have weaknesses anyway. We just have overplayed strengths. So if you have a weakness, just turn it around. It's a strength overplayed. Think about your personality. What is it that you would use to describe your personality? As many words as you can possibly think of. Authentic to you. I'll give you a few minutes to think about these as well. Then we've got your principles and your values. Some of you may find this quite tricky. Well, what are my values? One of the easiest ways to think, if you think about things that drive you mad when other people do things, it around, because that often value. You can hear me all right, can you, when it dips out? Should we just leave it? Yeah, okay. So if somebody's always turning up late to a meeting, for example, drives you mad. Maybe your value isn't about punctuality, it might be about deep respect for other people's time. So think about what drives you mad when other people do things. Turn it around, it becomes a value or a principle. It's the easiest way to look at it in a short space of time. Think about your talents and strengths. What is it you do every day that you're really great at? You just take it for granted because you do it. You just get on and do it. You don't think about it. I was coaching a female lawyer not so long ago, and one of the things that she was talking about as we went through her coaching process, as she told me about what she gets involved in on a day-to-day basis, was she said, I often get asked to write articles for the firm's intranet, internal magazine. And I said, Susan, that means you've got a talent for writing. And she looked at me a bit confused, and she said, no, I don't have a talent for writing. I just enjoy doing it. Everybody's good at writing. Now, you do know as well as I do, not everybody's good at writing. Some people find it easy. And I said, Susan, you have a talent there. She just didn't realize she. So just write some things down that really just you get on with and do every day, but actually perhaps they are a talent. And then your natural style. So if you're met with a new challenge tomorrow, a new role, a new project, how do you apply it? Are very flexible or very logical, methodical, structured, a little bit off the wall, very creative? Any words you can think of, and this will just get you started. I'm just going to give you a minute to get as much written down as you can, just to take yourself out of corporate space for a moment and think about yourselves. You could also do this for your team if you want to, but probably good to focus on yourself right now. Think about yourself outside of work, outside your professional role as well. Because we do have just one brand. People often say to me, well, I have one brand at work and one brand when I'm at home with the family and with friends. If you start to think of yourself as having two brands, then you're very likely going to be inconsistent or come across as insincere or ungenuine. So if you're a fun-loving person outside of work, that's got to come into the workspace in an appropriate way. Otherwise, you'll be in a very stressful environment. So think of yourself outside as a mum, a dad, a sister, brother, a daughter, a son, a friend, as well as your professional role. Just see if you come up with more words there. All right, so take those words that you've just written down, and I want you to look at those and circle 3 of them. Which 3 are the most important to you to be seen as a leadership brand? If you wanted people to talk about you in a way behind your back, in a professional sense, which 3 words are the most important to you? Just circle those words for me. Now, they're all important because you've written them all down. But which are the 3 you'd most like people to say about you when you're not there? You're not going to share this with anybody. Don't worry, you can keep this to yourself. Okay, so we're now going to put this to the test a little bit. And how you see yourself, of course, is very different to how other people see you, as we've already established. So what I'd like you to do at this point is to put those down, and I'd like you to find yourself a partner to work with. Now, for those of you who don't like doing exercises, this is a very quick 40-second exercise, so you don't have to get alarmed. So find yourself a partner, preferably somebody you don't know very well, somebody you don't work with, somebody you've only just met today or not at all. So just find yourself a partner, and then I'll tell you what you've got to do, okay? Move around if you need to. Okay, has everybody found themselves a partner? Just stick your hand up if you haven't got a partner. Everybody got a partner, okay. Right, here's what you're going to do then. First of all, you're going to decide who's going to be A and who's going to be B. Quick exercise, very quick. Who's going to be A and who's going to be B? Okay, that should have taken 2 seconds. Great. This is what you're going to do next. You're going to, I'm going to give you 20 seconds each just to introduce yourself. And you're going to have 20 seconds just to give the best bit about yourself. Just talk about your background, where you've come from, what you do, which company you're with right now, what you love about your job. Just in sentences, not one words. Just talk about yourself for 20 seconds. I know that's hard. Some of you love talking about yourself. Some won't. But you're going to get just 20 seconds. And then what I'm going to do is swap you around, change you around, and we'll do the 20 seconds on the other person. I want you to just listen. I don't want you to write anything down. I want you to listen as your partner's talking and just absorb as much as you can. So let's see who the A's are to start with. Can you put your hands up? Okay, we're going to start with the B's then. You all thought you were going to get it over and done with, right? I'll go first. Right, so we're going to start with the B's. And I'm going to give you 20 seconds to give your best of yourself in 20 seconds. The A's are going to listen, and then I'm going to change you over. Off you go. Okay, and finish. I know it's not long enough, is it? It's not long enough for you to talk about yourself. 20 seconds, nowhere near long enough for me to get out everything I want to about myself. But guess what? It's long enough for your partner to have gauged a little bit about your brand, whether you think you have or not. What we do is take in a first impression incredibly quickly. It just takes seconds to have a feeling about someone, and it's a subconscious impression we have. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is to take that subconscious impression you have of your partner and write it down. So you're going to take these postcards. You should all have postcards on the tables there. Take a postcard, and on the back, you're going to write the person's name that you've just worked with. And that's your first test, by the way. Did you listen to the name, really listen? Or do you have to look at the name badge to get that? Because we never listen to names. So you're going to write their name on the back. And then you're going to write down 3 words or short phrases that describe that person's brand. And we're going to keep this positive as well, okay? We don't have time to deal with the negatives today. So 3 words that for you describe that person's brand. You don't know if it's accurate. You just got to get it from what they've said, how they've said it, the non-verbal communication, how they've come across to you, anything at all that gives you 3 words that describe that person's brand. Ah, that's shut you all up, hasn't it? Got to focus now. You're just going to keep this to yourself for the time being anyway. I'll just give you a minute to just get 3 words or short phrases written down that describe that brand. Positive words. I love watching this exercise. There's a lot of staring goes on as you look at each other to get that expression. Okay, a few more seconds. Hopefully you've got 3. Okay, so here's what we're going to do now. Without scribbling that out and starting again, I want you to give that card to the person you've worked with. Have a look at the words as they come back. See if they're accurate. Are they miles off message? Are they similar to the 3 words you circled, or are they completely different? Just have a look at the words as they've come back from somebody who's made a quick assessment of your brand. Okay, if I can have everybody back again. Again, I know it's not long enough to discuss what people say about you, and you want to know more. You want to know why they said that. You want to know if it's negative. You want to know if it's positive. You'll have some time at lunch and the rest of the day to analyze that a little bit more. But sorry, I've got to break that discussion up now to move on. But it gives you a quick idea of what people get from you. Now, some of you will have had fantastic comments there, and you think, wow, I didn't know I came across like that. Or some of you might think, oh, I'm not sure I really wanted that to come through. Some of you might think, well, there's other things about me that I'd like people to get when I first meet them that perhaps didn't come through strongly there. Just gives you an indication of perhaps what you need to work on. Great exercise to do with teams. We do a lot of 360-degree feedback, of course, lots of form filling in, which is great, but a really effective exercise just to do with the team. It's a fun thing to do. Now, how many of you have teenage kids? Let me see how many of you have teenage kids. Okay, ask them for 3 words that describe you when you get back tonight. You'll be amazed. It might be really useful, it might not. Or even kids, you know, over the age of 10, it's quite helpful to know what they would say in 3 words. If you ask close friends, they will come up with words, I promise you, that you wouldn't even expect. My husband did this on me once. He's my ex-husband now, but it's nothing to do with the exercise. But one of my special birthday parties, he got all of our friends and family to give him 3 words that describe me. And then he put the top 3 up on a screen at the party. And I said, oh, that's a really cruel thing to do. And he said, well, you know, that's what you do on everybody every day, so I thought I'd do it on you. They weren't too bad, by the way. I don't know if he was being really kind. But ask people close to you. That will give you a real insight into what your brand is that you perhaps don't even see yourself. So, moving on those postcards, you do have what I call the 7 big strides to walking tall. And just to give you a bit of background to walking tall, you probably all realize by now that the giraffe is synonymous with the walking tall brand. And if you're really perceptive, you probably worked out there's nothing to do with being physically tall as well. I'm only 5'1.5". That ½ inch is really important to me, by the way. It's always there. I never quite made 5'2". And if I just tell you a little bit about the background of the Walking Tall story, it might just help you think about the brand perhaps for yourself. When I first wrote the book, Walking Tall, I had a contract with McGraw-Hill and in the UK, and I couldn't come up with the title. My company was called something different then. And they kept pushing me for the title. And I thought back through my life history so far and thought, what are some of the common threads that I can come up with that will give me that title? And I remember being at school when I was at primary school, about 5 or 6, 7, 8, and I was smaller than the other kids at school, and I didn't like being smaller. It wasn't something that really sat well with me. I guess I wanted to be visible even then without really realizing it. And I remember in our school we had this system called the school colors. You'll have had similar things over here, and it was about if you represented your school at music and sport and various things, you got your school colours. And for us, because we have uniforms in the UK, it meant a nice red and pink striped tie to wear with our uniform and a big badge on your jacket. And I thought to myself, yeah, I'll do the school colours. It helped me stand out a little bit more when I'm small. So I did it all, and I did all the music I could. I got chosen for most of the sports teams, except one. You can guess what that was. Basketball, yeah. We used to call it netball in the UK because I was too small. There was a lady in the front row in one of my sessions not so long ago, and she said, Lesley, I'm only 5 foot tall, and I always got chosen for the netball team. So maybe I was just crap at it, but I put it down to my height anyway. And I remember rushing off to the changing room every Wednesday morning and looking at the team on the wall. And I was never chosen. Never got the school colours because of that. However, one spring, I remember it so clearly, they had a flu epidemic that swept the school, and they were desperate, and I got chosen that one team for the netball team and got the school colours. And it was just thinking through this story that allowed me to come up with the title, Walking Tall. So if I was to say to you now, if you were to think about your life story so far and put it into a book, what would the title of your book be? Now, you may get it instantly. You may not get it till later. You may get it next week, next month. But think about what the title of your book would be. Has anyone got theirs instantly, by the way? You have? Oh, do you mind sharing?
It's kind of a funny story.
Okay. Oh, it was kind of a funny story. Fabulous. I like that. That's great. It's kind of a funny story. Wonderful. So now what you'll find is that all your chapter headings will start spinning off. And you'll think about all the experiences that give you that title. And it helps you to really come up with what your story is, which again helps you to communicate who you are. It helps you to get across a key message in a presentation if you can relate it to something that's happened to you. People take it on board more, they engage with it more. The ginger beer story, people remember that. So the 7 big strides start with who you really are. And we've heard this already today as well from David. Who you are authentically, and we've done a bit of delving there. How many of you just met somebody or just did that exercise with somebody you've just met today? Oh, good, a good percentage of you. So you will have tested out first impressions. We make a first impression incredibly quickly, 5 to 7 seconds. In fact, I read an article not so long ago, it suggests it takes just 10 milliseconds to judge somebody, which is a bit worrying. We do scan somebody in, of course, when we meet them, and without realizing it, we actually come up with a perception, which we don't know if is accurate. But we do need to think about those first impressions because we live in a very fast-moving, quick, image-conscious world now. Think about those first impressions you have when you walk into the meeting, when you arrive, the first things you say. David said as well about getting into the conversation quickly. Even if you're a methodical, logical person, say something early on. Even if it's not an opinion, but just asking someone else's views or relating back to something someone said. Just get in on the conversation early because that's a first impression to a lot of people. Your visual brand does count. So whether we like it or not, what we wear, people do judge us on. Fashion critic James Laver once said, "Clothing is the furniture of the mind made visible." Clothing is the furniture of the mind made visible. Now, in the world we live in, we think it just shouldn't matter what we wear. Why should people judge us on what we wear? But the thing is, it's there. It's a visual thing. We need to just make sure that what we choose to wrap our brand in and package ourselves in is actually conducive and reflective of the personality we want to project in the business we're in today. Where do you want to be? How do you want to be perceived professionally? Are the wardrobe choices in alignment with that? Let's just do a very quick, fun exercise on this. If you can all put your pens down for a moment and just clench your fists for me. I'd like you to clench your fists and close your eyes. I'd like you to imagine walking into your bedroom and opening up the closet doors. I'd like you to put one finger up for every item of clothing that's been in there for over a year and you haven't worn. In some cases, it's gone through 4 seasons and you haven't taken it out of the cupboard. Everything that doesn't fit anymore, too big, too small, wishful thinking. Everything you think, oh, that'll come back into fashion in a couple of years, I'll keep that. If you've done it the first time round, don't do it the second time round, it'll look dated. Everything that's got a mark or a stain on it that you think nobody will notice, and they always do. You put your hands down now, but just think about what's in there. 80% of people wear 20% of their wardrobe 80% of the time. Is that true? Yeah. We have that 20% that we know we're going to communicate more effectively in, we're more confident in. So we pick it out, and we wear it 80% of the time. So why not just work out why that works and replicate it? We don't need loads in the wardrobe. So your visual brand, that non-verbal stuff does count, and it should all be part of the message that we put together. Often it's forgotten about. So this is an important one, being memorable and visible. Often we think, well, it's our turn next to get that voice at the board table or for that next opportunity for exposure or promotion. But we don't work at keeping ourselves visible and being memorable. And I would urge you all to have a visibility plan for you personally, maybe for the team as well, in which you can start to see what you can do each day or each week within the business to build that visibility internally and externally. On the app after the presentation, you'll have a list of visibility ideas that you can use perhaps to raise your visibility and to think about it in a more structured and perhaps more conscious way. But it doesn't always have to be about being face-to-face visible. It's not always possible. But thinking about what might be on somebody else's agenda. Is there a senior executive that you want to get to? Just find out what's on their agenda at the moment. What do they need to know? What's keeping them awake at night? Is there something you can give them that's meaningful that will help them? Make it about them. But also at the same time, it's making you more visible and perhaps establishing your brand a little bit more. Make it about other people. And again, the ginger beer story, make it about them, not about you. I always remember a situation a few years ago. It was when my son, Max, had just got a place at Cardiff University in the UK. And it was a time when he hadn't got his A-level grades that he needed, and he had to go through a last-minute clearing. I think you have something similar here. So he had to go through a clearing phase to get this place. And he hadn't got his accommodation sorted out with 2 weeks to go. And I was coaching a senior executive who was a company secretary for a FTSE 100 company, very busy man. And on the first session, we were just making small talk, and I was telling him about Max and this stress with not getting his accommodation sorted out with 2 weeks to go. Second time I saw this guy for his second session was about 8 weeks later. And the first thing he said to me was, Lesley, tell me about Max. How did he get on with his accommodation at Cardiff? And I was just blown away that this man, as busy as he is, remembered that situation about me at the time, not just the situation, but the details, Max and Cardiff University. And it just reminded me how powerful it is when we think about other people, when we remember that they've just gone on a holiday of a lifetime, when we remember that they had something go wrong in their lives, and we remember to check in. Little things like this have an incredible, powerful impact on your visibility and your brand, if it's done in an authentic way, of course. So there's lots of things around visibility we can use just to get in front of people, and certainly using the Populo platform. I mean, thinking about how your brand can come across there, how the team brand can come through as well for your own benefit. Think about that whole visibility piece, getting the key messages across. Presentational brand matters. It's another area we're not going to go into today, but the stories that we've touched on can help you to get your personal brand into delivery of a message. And one very quick structure that you might be able to just take away with you when you're creating a presentation, perhaps presenting complex data to get you in front of the C-suite, is to think about what it is, what's the key point. Second step is how can I reinforce that key point with a story, an analogy, something visual that people can hang on to. Because some people view things visually, and we all take away things more if they're visual in our head. So think about a story, something personal to you, something that's in the news, something that's visual. And then make the application back again. Make it appropriate to them. I had a senior executive I was coaching, was talking about absenteeism, presenting to the board the following week, and he had all these facts and figures. It was a little bit boring. And I said to him, right, your first statement is you give them the facts. So the fact is, if we added up all the absenteeism hours in a week across the country, we could run another superstore for a month, something like 11,000 hours. I said, you hit them with that to start with. That's the fact. Then you tell the story of how you've done this research, how you've gone around the different offices, the desks are empty. It looks like the Marie Celeste in a lot of the offices up in Scotland. There's all these empty desks. And just tell the story and then relate it back to them. So if we don't do anything about this situation, this is what the company's going to look like in 6 months' time. This is the impact on the bottom line. This is going to be the impact on our staff turnover, whatever it might be. And if you can present data in a way that makes it real with stories, it's going to make you a more engaging presenter. So that's your brand coming through as well. I call it presentational brand. And then the statement brand me. This is what goes on to perhaps your LinkedIn summary. This is about you, written in the first person. Those few lines, that espresso effect, the pure essence that you could say, this is what I do. This is what really drives me. This is what I'm great at because I love to do X, Y, and Z. This is the passion I have. Just talk about you, not operationally so much, but what it is that you do and why you do that well. And again, of course, it takes time to refine that. And the very last point is about consistency. For any brand to be successful, it has to be consistent, whether it's a corporate brand, a team brand, or a personal brand. People say to me often, well, you know, there are people out there that don't have a consistent brand, but they're very successful. Richard Branson's one that often crops up. People say, well, look, he looks a mess often when he presents a message. His shirt sleeves rolled up, he looks a bit crumpled, he doesn't have good eye contact, but he's very, he's consistent with the message, which is why I really believe that he gets his message across and he's authentic all the time, and that's why he's consistent. Another great personal brand that we always claim in the UK is David Beckham. Are you all aware of David Beckham, the footballer? Yeah, we always claim him. I know he spent some time over here in the US, but he's still our brand. Probably one of the most valuable personal brands in the world. And I was lucky enough to work on an ITV documentary on the Beckham brand a few years ago. And it was about the time that he had an alleged affair with his assistant in Spain. I don't know if anybody remembers that. A person called Rebecca Luz. And it hit the press. And we did a survey as part of the program I was working on. And we found out that 50% of people blamed Rebecca Luz for this alleged affair. And the other 50% blamed his wife, Victoria. And nobody actually blamed him. And I remember saying at the time, yes, this is just what we need for the program because it shows the consistency of a brand. We don't believe it because it doesn't fit that brand that we see all the time. So if he did do it, it must have been somebody else's fault, is what we thought. Wouldn't it be lovely to have that? I used to call it the Beckham blip, and I spoke on BBC News about the Beckham blip. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to have a brand that's strong enough that when we do mess up, because it does happen, we don't always do what we need to do, things go wrong, that it's just considered a blip and not part of our brand. And that's what I mean by consistency. So we're going to open it up to Q&A now as well, so we can get some questions from you and through the app, and then I'll just tie up at the end.
Great. Well, thank you. Dave, we've got, do we have any questions on the board and any questions from the floor?
Why don't we start with questions from the floor, I think, because I'm getting a little problem connecting here. Give me 1 sec.
I think we've got just a couple minutes. Are we all feeling like pearls? No questions?
Easy.
In our company, we get great support from our leadership. However, our efforts to try to get them to be more proactive sort of fall on deaf ears, trying to get them to promote their brand, sometimes externally, maybe a little more internally. What would you suggest for counteracting that?
Okay, so when you're helping leaders to get more effective at projecting their brands, okay. It would be a method I would use in coaching, and that's to really find out what their goals are. Some of them don't want to be, worldwide known for something, but they might want to make a difference in the IC space or in the technology space or the retail space, whatever business you're in. So it's really getting to the depth of what is it that they want to achieve, what's their overall goal for the business or themselves, and then look at how this, being more visible, getting more authenticity into the brand, by them being more expressive and more visible is going to support that. So always tap into what their goal is. I would suggest that's the main thing, making it about them, in other words. Yep, I hope that helps.
Yeah, I've got some questions over here, Lesley. So can you name a few celebrities or well-known people who you think embody your walking tall philosophy?
Yeah, it's always a tough one when I'm in the US, because I know so many more UK ones, I guess. There's the obvious ones like Oprah Winfrey, who's, whatever you think about her, and everybody knows who she is. Humanitarian is a thread that runs right the way through that brand and consistency as well. As I said, Richard Branson is one. When you look at some brands that have been consistent, some of them get broken, they don't recover. So we had the Tiger Woods situation. I'm not sure he's ever really recovered from that because the blip was so big, and also maybe the brand, I don't know whether it was strong enough in the first sense, so I don't know. But we all know, Steve Jobs was another very obvious one. Is Apple quite the same without Steve Jobs? I don't know. Is Virgin going to be the same without Richard Branson? It's one of those things. But the Trump brand. That had to come at some point. It's a strong brand. Yeah, I think we probably, there's some common words that we could all use about the Trump brand. We opened it up, there'll be some commonality. I can't argue with the brand. I won't get into the political side of it, but yeah, it's a brand that certainly is very strong in our world today.
I've got another one here, Lesley. As we learn and grow, how does our personal brand change? How do you adjust as you're going through your career cycle and adjust the brand?
Sure, and it should evolve, and that's the first thing. It shouldn't stay where it is, it should evolve. And the key thing is getting feedback. So looking at what your goals are, what are your next development goals, what are your next business goals, and looking at how do I need to evolve my brand to achieve those. So similar to what I was saying just now, and getting the feedback from people to make sure you're on track. I have got a simple questionnaire which I use in our programs to get feedback. So if anybody wants that sent, just drop me an email. You've got our contact details on those cards. And just keep testing it out, because the perceptions are often so different to how you see your own brand that you can't manage it effectively and evolve it effectively if you're not getting that feedback from other people, that candid feedback.
One other, how do you change your brand with the C-suite?
How do you change your brand with the C-suite? Okay, first of all, you need to ask yourself, do I need to change it? You need to know how you're perceived to start with. And that's a big question. It's a very big question, of course. It comes back to what the goals are. It comes back to thinking about what do the C-suite need. You've got access to so much data, and you're at the center of communication. So think about what is it that I can strategically provide that's going to make a difference at board level, and how can I deliver that? You don't want to deliver a 32-page report on something to a CEO who has very limited time. It needs to be a one sheet, a one page, key things, key points. That will get their ear. But if it's about them, it's about a strategic priority in the business. You should all know what the strategic priorities are for the business, what the business goals are, what the drivers are, in as much detail as you can get behind that, and then look at what you can bring and what the team can bring to support that, put it in a succinct way and get it in front of the C-suite. But it's got to be about them. It's got to be it's got to be a solution to something they're working on right now, otherwise you just won't get their ears.
Great.
So that's, I think we're out of time. I'm going to let you wrap up, Lesley.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you. So any other questions, just drop me an email and keep in touch, of course. But time for action, just some things for you to do, just to summarize here in the next 7 days. I think really identify how you want to be perceived in your professional role. Really ask yourself that deep question. How do you want to be perceived? What do we need to add to your brand to do that? What are the authentic elements of your personal brand that will allow you to be perceived in the way you want to? What are you doing great, and what do you need to work on a little bit more? Get some feedback. Do that in the next 7 days. Just ask people, how would you describe my brand in a few words? Find an opportunity to increase your visibility. Those of you who don't like presenting, get out of that. Get out there more. Get great at presenting. Find an opportunity to be more visible, to do something that you wouldn't normally do, to write something, to meet with someone, to present somewhere, externally as well. Look at your LinkedIn profile. It's no longer a resume online. It's a window into you. It's your digital brand, and we haven't touched on that, but you really need to revamp that. Make sure you've got a good, up-to-date, close-up professional photograph, not of you 50 feet away standing against a wall, or of the dog, or if you have no photo on LinkedIn, change it. You've got to have that photo there. And just one thing for you to do, because we're working closely with Populo on looking at how we can elevate the IC team brand through personal branding and awareness. If you just text the word, oh, actually, that should say IC. That wasn't changed. Not elevate. That should say IC. Text IC to 797979. If you just text that now, it'll send you free of charge. It's just a link that will give you an outline program of some things that might help you to get this in your business and aligned a little bit more. So it's just text IC to 797979. So we're back to the pearl and adding the layers. And I just want to leave you with one last thought. It was a great Oscar Wilde that once said, there's only one thing worse than being talked about. And that, of course, is not being talked about. We need to be talked about, but in a way that we control, in a way that we are aware of, that we're conscious of, and we manage. And when you're only 5'1.5" tall, sometimes you need a little bit of help to stand out from the crowd. And this is how I do it. With a bit of help from Photoshop. And just one last quote there I was going to use, that I do believe that world class is about having a strong personality that's known over and above your individual products and services. And I think as an IC function, you really do have an ability to create this in the organizations you work for and for yourselves as individuals and teams. So good luck with that. Stay in touch, and I'm around for the rest of the day as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Lesley. Thanks, Lesley. Some great stuff.